Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. Now last week we did see the launch of Secrets of the Abyss, a special event where you have to dive into the Abyss, earn points and then you can get some really cool skins for the Triglavian. But I must say that doing it and staying in tier 1, tier 2 is not easy. That's quite a lot of work at the moment. But we'll see how we get along with Secrets of the Abyss and well, other than that, it is late summer at the moment, so for the economy right now I personally am looking for bottom activities. I do think that that's realistic, but once September is in full swing, that's usually when we do see turnarounds when it comes to the market in EVE Online. As part of the intro, I am going to take a look at the New Eden store, which is right here. Sales that I find interesting is when you get 30 days game time and you get something extra there. That doesn't feel like you're spending ridiculous money on cosmetic items or anything like that. So a bundle like that is often interesting. Let's take a look here. Skill extractors are on sale a little bit. The 5 packs and the 10 packs, you get the Caldara Industrial bundle for Concord Firewatch, almost a full month game time. That's pretty expensive. Conversus 800 ISK for Conversus Nova, the Damavik Hidean Horror Skin. Anything? Oh, these are pretty cool though. Men's Triglavian suit, 125 plex. Doesn't seem to cost that much and it's definitely quite a unique look. And then other than that we've got some new ones, but 30 days Omega clone time is still just 500 plex. I thought that there was like a skin, another skin I was going to get added here, but maybe that is later on. And then I think for new stuff, Ultra Jungle, yeah, alright, nothing too interesting this week for me personally, but I do like how the Triglavian suits look. That's pretty damn cool. Alright, let's move on to the market. We are here for that, of course. As always, we are going to start with some plex and stuff at 225. There we go, plex. And plex are up a little bit. You can clearly see that on the chart. The bottom has been formed, in my opinion, for less than 2.75 million is pretty obviously on the chart. And we are back up at this point. 2 million. Well, there's one sell order here in Cheetah for 2,850,000 of only 50 plex, but most of them are at around 2.9 million. And if we go down to the player owned trade hubs, we are at a couple sell orders at 2.8 million, then jumping to that 285, and then after that we're going to, well, we have to go quite a little bit here to get up to 2.9 for Cheetah itself, whereas the buyers are coming in at practically 2.8 million ISK. So a very narrow margin. Both sellers and buyers have been pushed up a little bit, forming this pretty obvious bottom on the chart. The skill extractors, very same pattern of course. We saw that they are still on sale a little bit, but you know, it's almost inevitable that plex and skill extractors move very closely together. So here a bottom of around 310 million is currently selling for 323 million and the buyers coming in at 314. I guess that the sale is still keeping that margin up a little bit. It's definitely a bigger percentage margin, I think, between the skill extractors here, sellers and buyers, compared to the plex, and I think that's where the sale can be accounted for. For the multiple pilot training certificate, same pattern here as well. Not as good as the April bottom of less than 880 million ISK, but coming very close to that at close to 900 million ISK. And now we are back up. Look at the increased volumes during the sales. That is pretty normal, going down from 1.15 billion, I think, 1.2 billion in fact, down to 900 million, and now on its way back up. 1 billion for the sellers and almost 1 billion for the buyers. Again, very narrow margin on this way back up, so it does look like the market is seeing that most of the sales are starting to be over, and as a result we are going back up in prices. Would have been a great time to buy last week in plex, in the trading certificates and in the skill extractors, it seems. Now for the skill injectors, let's take a look at those, continuing their slide down, heading towards 700 million. That's quite surprising to me. That should mean that there's not that much demand for skill points at the moment in the market. Could be a sign of lower summer activity, but selling for 721 million ISK, and buyers coming in at 697, less than 700 million ISK. You can definitely, in my opinion, grab some large scale injectors for 700 million ISK. Doable, affordable, and if I look at this chart again, potentially something that could be a very interesting investment, but admittedly it also feels quite risky. Still, clear 1 year low point, close to 700 million ISK. The potential up to 800 and above is definitely exists. We can see that on the chart here. The real question is, of course, what exactly is happening with the skill injector market. And, well, we've seen GM week last week as well, with that cool event where they grab some bots, put them in high sec for people to execute. They might be moving hard on botters at the moment, and I think that skill points is definitely a trade that they are active in as well. Or there may be reasons why skill point farms for some reason are dumping everything that they have. For the small skill injector, we actually have the turnaround already. Was going for less than 150 million, I think. Not very visible on the chart, but I think so. And now we are already back up substantially. Well, no, 150 for the sellers, 140 for the buyers. This actually seems like a data anomaly today that put the price at 160. I actually think that we are going to stay and head below 150 in all actuality. And then we still have the daily alpha injector that is slightly down for the week, but staying at a pretty average price of 58 million for the sellers and 53.5 for the buyers. This is quite surprising. So an average price for the daily alpha injectors, but for the large and small scale injector we have 1 year lows. This is something that's completely different from each other. They are different items. Granted, the skill points needed to create these large scale injectors have to come from the player base. So it looks like there's a bit of dumping happening there, oversupply happening there, whereas the daily alpha injectors basically are items that are bought straight from CCP and are apparently in a steadier place because of that. But this to me comes as quite a surprise that we are continuing to go down on the large scale injectors. I might actually purchase a couple if I can buy them for 700 million or less. I think that that's not a bad deal personally. Again, don't put all your eggs in a single basket. I'm not going to spend all my ISK on large scale injectors either. Maybe I'll buy a couple, see how that pans out in the future. Next up, we are moving on to some minerals at 750. Like that, and we are going to of course start with titanium that has formed the top, went as high as 7.5 to 7.6 ISK. Not bad at all, a great price, and is now back down to around 6.5 on the chart. 6.5 for the sellers, 6.5 for the buyers. That's pretty much the new price range that the market has decided on. It is a bit quieter in nullsec, it must be said. No more massive titan brawls, no more keep stars destroyed and things like that. As a result, we are taking a bit of a breather. More supply manages to trickle in. And, well, not necessarily that. I think that there's less need to grab titanium from Cheetah in order to rebuild stuff in nullsec at the moment. So I should say that there's a bit less demand, I think, for titanium on the market. And as a result, we have this pullback still. 6.5 ISK is well above the average and is still absolutely a great price for titanium. I do think that that's bad news for the massively oversupplied minerals. And as you can tell right here, pyrite that went back to 4.5 ISK for just a little bit is under pressure once again and heading for that 4 ISK price mark. 406 for the sellers, 395 for the buyers, 4 on average, and still way oversupplied with hundreds of millions in volumes coming to the market. The one that I personally find could be interesting would be Mexalon, and that one is unfortunately also having to give back a little bit of the gained ground. Went as high as 75 ISK, which was above average but not by too much, and is currently selling for 68.76, so 69 ISK for the sellers and 64 for the buyers, which is still a little bit below average, still an okay price for Mexalon, but it does show that I think things have slowed down a little bit in nullsec, and that the bottleneck mineral, which apparently for the really big stuff seems to be titanium, but for general purposes would be Mexalon, did not manage to go as high or as convincingly high as titanium. It did come back a little bit to just above average, but already on its way back down because of the quieter period. Next up, we've got Isogen flat at the 1 year low point. There's not much to say here. Selling for 27 ISK, buyers coming in at 27 ISK. It's, you know, ridiculously low for Isogen. Historically speaking, should be more expensive than Mexilon because of normal volumes from the ores and things like that, but it's just not happening. Isogen is staying super low. For Noxium next, that also managed to make a comeback up to 350, is now on its way back down to 300 ISK. And the real question is, throughout the year 300 has been defended several times, but eventually in June we broke through that and we found 250 to be an actual bottom for Noxium. The real question is, this downtrend here, will it stop at 300 or will the market decide to play with 250 once again? I think it can. So 315 for the sellers, 301 for the buyers. I personally fear that as more supply comes in, we will again break through 300 and have 250 to 300 become the price range for Noxium. That's my personal expectation, of course. Next up, we have Zydrine flat as well at a pretty low price because of the moon mining changes. So 535 for the sellers, 508 is for the buyers. Bit of margin here, staying basically above 500 ISK for Zydrine. But again, you can see that the times where Nullsec was completely dominating the supply of Zydrine and dictating the price through the sell orders is completely over. Just look at what's coming in the last 24 hours. 4 million, 5 million, 6 million, 3 million, another 4 million. These are moon mining batches that come from the active moons in a nullsec that are basically keeping that price really low. And from time to time you probably have bigger batches as well, but you have this steady supply across the days that comes in the millions that keeps competing with each other. That is, I think, what's basically most important here. So we've got 0.56, then we've got 0.55, then someone comes in at 0.54, 0.52. These are individual producers and sellers of Zydrine that are actively competing with each other. Before moon mining was available for 0.5 systems in HiSec, all of this was dominated by nullsec. They had more patience and they were actually willing to put up bigger batches but more slowly, forcing people to pay their price and keeping that price under their control. That is just basically impossible now. Megasite actually slightly down for the week as well, selling for 580, buyers coming in at 580 as well. And here we see a bit less supply, basically 4 million, 1 million, another million here, another million there. So a bit less competition is keeping that price from going down even further. And the buyers are actually with one really big buyer at 578.44. keeping that price in check as well. And then finally we have Morphite that is climbing to new highs. Not bad, heading for 12,000 ISK on today's data point. 12,000 for the sellers, 11,000 for the buyers. If you still have some of that Morphite lying around that you bought for less than 9,000 ISK, this is a great time to sell. We are actually reaching the peak, the 1 year high price for the third time this year. 12,000 ISK for Morphite. Definitely a great time to sell. Not a good sign for Tech 2 ships though, because Morphite is tied to that economy, not the Tech 1 economy. Next up we have our PI coming in at 1345. There we go. There was a request for something extra for PI, but I can't remember what it is. So if I think about it, maybe it'll come back to me. Otherwise, we'll get going. Here are the broadcast nodes. After reaching 2 million on the chart, went back up a little bit, but is basically staying around the 2.1 million mark at the moment. Yeah, a bit above 2.1 million for the sellers, a bit below 2.1 million for the buyers. Still quite affordable. I think we basically don't know enough about the new structures that are in development to take big gambles on this, but I also feel like if you, for instance, want to make those on day one, if you want to have a chance at a profit, look at the buyers and try to grab these items, these advanced PI materials for a cheap price. Next up we have the construction blocks actually breaking through 11,000 ISK, heading for its 1 year low point. 11,245 for the sellers, 11,100 for the first buyer. That's not too many here, and most buyers actually coming in at 10,500. And apparently from the chart and from the average prices, people actually sell to these from time to time as well. So you could actually be patient, put up a sell order for instance 10,700 to try and grab it for less than 11k. And I think from time to time it actually works out. The average prices here do indicate that. So construction blocks under pressure, I think close to a buy order territory. Consumer electronics next, after reaching a 1-year high point of more than 16,000 ISK, has to give back its ground and is currently maybe even a touch below average. Well, for the sellers, nope, 13,500 bars, 12,700. If you disregard that one though, 12,200, that is starting to play with the averages for sure here. Yeah, absolutely. So pretty wide margin opening up here. Price under pressure for consumer electronics, but also we do start to see a flattening out of the chart, so maybe we'll be able to land at 12,500 and then start moving towards that 13k, which I would say is probably the average for the year. Next up, we've got the coolants. After dipping back a little bit, is currently moving in the 10 to 11,000 ISK range, which is quite respectable for coolants. 10,900 for the sellers and 10,300 for the buyers. Supply wise, not that much in the last 24 hours, so this actually seems to be pretty much in line with what the market wants and actually manages to push the price back up a little bit on average. And so we have a pretty okay situation for coolants. It's tied to fuels, it is being consumed, and it's nice to see that come back in the last 6 months to a more normal price for coolant producers. I think this is an okay price. Historically speaking, this is around average. Considering the last year, this is probably above average and a great time to produce and sell this. I always preferred making fuel-related PI materials just because of their stability, and so if we manage to stay stable in this trade range, I personally will be very happy with that. Enriched uranium is actually going down a little bit as well from a high point, relative high point if you look at the entire year, of course, more than 14,000 ISK. Currently selling for 12,100, buyers at 11,300. That is a pretty big margin though, so here be careful. Sellers are still at a good price above 12,000 ISK, but that margin opening up here is a bit dangerous. On more supply we could drop for enriched uranium prices. Integrity response drones next, after reaching a pretty nice 2.25 million pretty much on the chart as a bottom price, went back up above 2.5 million, currently selling for 2.6, a bit above that, and a bit above 2.5 for the buyers. So the obvious buy opportunity is over, but this is still no more than a normal price for integrity response drones. If you do want to stack some of these, have the patience to put up a buy order, in my opinion. Next up we have mechanical parts, dipping below 11,250 on the chart, but managing that slight comeback as well. So 11,800 for the sellers, 11,200 for the buyers, very close to the coolant prices. So if we could get this to keep moving, around 11,000 ISK, especially here, 11 to 12,000 ISK, I would personally be very happy. Yeah. Pretty good. Nuclear reactors next, finally going up for the second time. Will this create a sell opportunity? 110,000 for the sellers, 94,000 for the buyers. I would prefer a bit more pronounced of a sell opportunity before I jump in on that. Climb to 120, climb to 130. Not happening just yet, so the volatility in nuclear reactors, which used to come back every couple of months in quite a nice way, is not materializing at the moment. If you really want to get rid of some of the very cheap nuclear reactors that you've bought, which I have, then right now would probably be the time to do so. You can sell them for 110,000 ISK a piece. The organic mortar applicators, same pattern here, reaching 1 million ISK almost on the chart, then going back up, recovering to 1.1 million. A bit above that, it's actually a lead price, 1,137 for organic mortar applicators for the sellers. Very narrow margin with 1.1 million for the buyers here, but basically back on a normal average price. For the robotics, after reaching 110,000 ISK, had to give back a little bit of ground, but the 100,000 seems to be well defended. 105 for the sellers, 100,000 for the buyers. Stay above 100,000 and you still have a really good price for robotics. This can actually be produced on a single planet, but it needs to be the right one. I think like a plasma planet. You know, there you could make robotics on a single planet, which can be very lucrative, especially with the stability of those prices. Self-harmonizing power cores is playing with that 2 million on the chart though. That is interesting. 2 million for the sellers, 1,850,000 for the buyers. That is pretty nice, I would say. If there's anything that you want to buy right now for advanced PI materials, put up a buy order for the self-harmonizing power cores well below the chart at this point. Tricky to grab them. It doesn't happen very often. I think you'll have to go to the 1.9 and above price mark in order to be decently certain that you'll grab some, but it's still below 2 million, below the entire chart. To me, it makes a lot of sense to make a move here. Superconductors next, back around average, 13,000 isks, not too much to say here. 13,500 for the sellers, 12,000 for the buyers. Pretty wide margin for this one, but you know, sellers okay on the average, 12,000 for the buyers. You know, just still okay. Definitely not completely below the chart or anything like that. So okay to produce, okay to sell. If you really want to be, no, I don't see any reason not to sell, to be honest. Test cultures next. After breaking 7,500, stage a little bit of a comeback on some increased volumes. I do think some investors have made a move. 8,180 for the sellers and 7,700 is for the buyers. Margin is okay, pretty average, but that buy opportunity from last week is obviously over. It's still not that great of a price though. Wetware mainframes next, also playing with those low points, well below 2.25 million, well below average as well. 2.2 million, a bit below that for the sellers, 2.1 million for the buyers. This is another one that personally, if you want to grab a couple, you know, put them below 2.2 million. Look at that on the chart. Well, you know, that's what's being tested right here. So I think you could go a bit more aggressive here on the buyers, closer to 2.1 million, but it definitely makes sense that if you want to get ready with some advanced PI materials, wetware mainframes and the self-harmonizing power cores seem to be in the right place for that. Next up, we have our advanced moon materials coming in at 2220. Like that, and as always we'll start with the carbide like items. Here is the crystalline carbonite, basically flat with today's average price pretty damn low. So 167 for the sellers, 148 for the buyers. On the chart this is below average, and the buyers at 148 is below everything. So I still think that if you want to make an investment here, try to grab some crystalline carbonite from the buy orders as close as possible to 150 or below. Next up we have the Fernite carbide. After breaking out a little bit to more than 200 ISK, has to give that back and moves back below 200 ISK. 186 for the sellers, 186 for the buyers as well, a bit above, a bit below. And here we are back to a slightly below average price, maybe back towards an average price here, but you know, a slight sell opportunity. And now this is basically the average, where it's not easy to say that you should buy or sell at. Ferrogel, nope, next up, sorry, we are going to take the titanium carbide, which is basically landing at 200 ISK and is obviously below average for the chart for the entire year as well here. So 205 for the sellers, 199 for the buyers. Here again, it's not a buy opportunity, but I feel like we are back below average here, so I would not blame you if you don't sell your titanium carbide at this price. Either be patient, wait for a better sell opportunity, or, you know, be very patient and wait for a buy opportunity to lower your average prices here. Now we've got a tungsten carbide that is actually dropping off. Tungsten carbide was above average, managing to maintain a price of 250 ISK. Currently going back down, 224 for the sellers, 215 for the buyers, back basically towards an average price here, between 200 and 225 on the chart, I would say. So Basically all of these except for crystalline carbonite are dipping, heading to average, below average prices, and on crystalline carbonite you can still purchase these for less than 150. That would be your investment place in my opinion. Next up we have the metamaterials. We'll start with the photonic metamaterials that are also giving back a little bit of ground, managing to command a price of 22,500 ISK for quite a bit in August. Above average in my opinion, dipping back to 20,000 ISK, which you could put as the average in my opinion. 20,000 for the sellers, 20,000 for the buyers. Basically back on an average price for photonic metamaterials as well. Next up we have the plasmonic metamaterials. After reaching a 1-year high of 30,000 ISK in August or early August, has to give back all that ground, and in fact seems to be below 20,000 ISK. No, sellers at 2,500, buyers at 19,500, average 20,000, which is right back on the average price as well. That is quite surprising. Non-linear metamaterials, same pattern, commanding a price of more than 30,000 ISK for the first half of August, has to give back some of that ground, and here maybe 25k is probably the average price. 27,750 for the sellers, 26,900 for the buyers, still a bit above average, but we can clearly see that we are currently in the process of giving back a lot of the price ground. And finally we have the terahertz meta materials that have also been able to have a pretty good summer at above average prices, with peaks up to 30,000 ISK. An average price is probably below 25,000, and that's exactly where we're back at. So we finally broke that 25,000 psychological barrier here, and then we went down quite a bit in the last week or so. 22,500 for the sellers, 22,100 for the buyers, back to an average price yet again. So all of these advanced moon materials seems to be giving back a lot of ground and back on average prices, where you could sell if you want to, but you're not making special ISK, and it's probably too early to decide on a buy order because the gaps here are still not that high between sellers and buyers. For all the extra moon material stuff, here are the fermionic condensates, managing to stay well above average at the moment, 404,000 ISK, not bad. For the ferrogel, same pattern here, staying, well, actually breaking through the 55,000 ISK mark. Sellers are coming in at 54,500, buyers at 53,000 ISK. It's still well above average and a great price for the ferrogel, but again here the danger of some pressure seems to be real. Thinking about it at the moment, there is less activity in nullsec, less war activity in nullsec, so perhaps it means that with things stabilizing, there is somehow a bit more moon material supply that finds its way to Cheetah. Next up we have the fullerenes, same thing. After playing with 1500 3 times in the last 3 months, actually 1400 here in August, we are now seesawing our way back to a regular price of a bit above 1000 ISK, I would say. 1100 for the sellers, 1000 for the buyers. So fullerenes have also gone back to an average price range. Hypersynaptic fibers, after staying above 15,000 ISK for quite a bit, has also dropped back below that. Still a bit above average, I think 15,000 for the sellers, 14,160 for the buyers, but the pressure seems to be on here as well. And then nanotransmitters flat at an above average price of 6,000. That's just not moving too much, but look at that, sellers coming in here, 5,850, so that is potentially putting a bit more pressure on that as well. And then we have the phenolic composites, the one exception so far that is actually reaching a 1-year high, selling for 3,400 ISK. Buyers coming in, the first one at almost 3,400 as well, most of them 3,300 ISK here. So phenolic composites is a great one to try and make and bring to the market. You are getting a 1-year high price for those at the moment. And then finally we have the ceramic fibers that are flat just below 600 ISK, but you can see that I think the market wants to push this back to an average price of closer to 500 ISK. 580 for the sellers, 568 for the buyers. The general vibe this week for advanced moon materials seems to be more supplies, more prices back towards their averages. If that continues, perhaps in the upcoming weeks we'll find buy opportunities. It's still late summer, so maybe some oversupply and then not a fast pickup in activity in September could actually make that happen. Seems to be interesting to me, definitely something to look forward to. And then we know that there's one exception, the phenolic composites that are actually at a 1-year high point. Next up, we have our Tech 2 ships at 29.40. Let's take a look at those. Between the Morphite prices so high, well, the advanced move materials prices back towards an average. Maybe we'll spot an individual sell opportunity. I still personally expect to see above average prices and nothing too dramatic. So 31 million for the sellers of the Aries, 28.8 for the buyers. The chart still on average well above 30 million ISK. So you can see here that the buyers are opportunistic and below 830 million, but they're just never really grabbing a lot of ships from that here at the moment. So you could try, but I feel it's very risky. The Basilisk, that is pretty interesting. After reaching 300 million ISK, is now definitely on its way back down to less than 250. 245 for the sellers, 209 for the buyers. If you look at 209 on this entire chart, it is well below what we have seen in the last 10-11 months or so. So I would say that the Basilisk seems to be in buy order territory, to my great surprise. Definitely something that you could try. Grab a couple below 210 million ISK. I think you've got a nice price for that Basilisk. The Cerberus next, despite the increased activity that I was personally expecting with Into the Abyss, is actually dropping in price as well, heading to less than 250 million ISK, 257 for the sellers and 223 for the buyers. Here, even if it's not as an investment, try to grab a Cerberus at these buy prices. I think makes a lot of sense. It's a great ship in general, and having one in reserve I think always makes sense. But this chart looks pretty interesting, and then buyers at 223, definitely the lowest we've seen in a while. I'm quite surprised to see that in the cruiser markets and to see the frigate markets be this anemic. Here is the Claw again, 35 million flat at this price range, 36 for the sellers, 31.1 for the buyers, and it's basically nobody's selling to those buy orders. They just put them on the sell orders and wait for them to sell here with a very average high price at the moment. Yeah, definitely nothing to invest in. The Crow, after reaching a high point of almost 40 million ISK, has to give back that ground, is now landing on that 30 million ISK, 31 for the sellers, 27.4 for the buyers. If you can grab some for less than 28 million on the buyer sides, great, but I think it's going to be very tricky to do. So the Crow, maybe you could try to grab a couple there. Crusader, nicely landing above 30 million ISK, so unfortunately, nope, not the place where I would do any purchases. The Guardian, after reaching a high point of more than 300 million ISK, is now landing back on its average. So here we have sellers at 249 and buyers at 226. Maybe buyers at 226, if you can grab a couple, would make sense, but I feel like the Basilisk chart is a bit better if you're looking for that investment right now. Then we have the Heretic, basically flat at 80 million, trying to go below that, which means that sellers at 82, buyers at 75, narrow margin. Again, you know, need to be below 70 million for an investment, so that's a no. We've got the Hound stabilizing at 35 million ISK, quite unfortunate. The buyers of Hounds still at 32.8, so nope, I would need to see lower prices on that as well. The Ishtar we saw last week was going down in price to less than 250, bounced back up on some slightly higher volumes as well. 268 for the sellers, 249 for the buyers. Less than 250. No, I would say I'd need to see buyers even lower than this before I would consider it a buy opportunity. The Manticore slightly up again, staying in the 35 to 40 million trade range. You even have a slight sell opportunity right now at 42 million. The Nemesis, after reaching a high point of 30 of crazy 3 and oh, that's the Oneros, god damn it. I wanted to click on the Nemesis, there we go. After reaching a high point of 40 million ISK, has to give back a little bit of that ground, and the sellers are still at 33.7 million, buyers at 30 million. So again, I'd need to see more momentum on that, break through that 30 million mark, have buyers come in at 25, 26 million, something like that. That's when I would make a move right now. still too early, not the best. We saw the Oneros reach 1-year high point of 300 million ISK, giving back some ground, but definitely not in buy order territory just yet. 252 for the sellers, 214 for the buyers. That's still, yeah, around here on the charts. That's a no. Purifier staying well above 30 million ISK, don't like it. Raptor also just, you know, stable, landing at maybe 32, 33 million ISK. Buyers of these are at 30 million, and they just rarely grab a ship. That's pretty obvious from these charts. The Saber next, just, you know, below 80 million finally, but is this a buy opportunity? Nope. Then we've got the Scimitar after reaching, god damn it, Scimitar, there we go. After reaching 300 million on that one, is now giving back a little bit of ground, but still staying above average, selling for 263 and buyers at 247. We've got the Stiletto, also still well above 30 million, and then the Taranis that is breaking through the 30 million mark. That is a bit more interesting. 28 million on average, 28.7 for the sellers, 27 for the buyers, but the volumes of this one are very low. So maybe you could try to grab 1 or 2 Taranis on the buyer side of things and then hope for a spike on some massive interceptor fleet action. But to me, the safest bet would be the Basilisk right now. Try and grab a couple at around 210 million ISK, and I think you've got a great purchase. But for the others, it's still very tricky to make active trades in the Tech 2 ship market. Let's move on to the Tech 3 ship market at 35.50. Like that, and we'll start as always with the destroyers, with the Confessor seemingly under pressure a little bit, dipping back below 35 million ISK, and doing so with more supplies, 107, 120, 240. Yeah, not looking too good for the oversupply situation. I think it's basically happening right now, and that we have to be very careful for September. This is the exact pattern that we saw last year, or was it 2 years ago? I'm not exactly sure, and we actually saw these tactical destroyers go to close to 30 million ISK and buyers well below that. So be careful now. I personally feel like oversupply is gonna be a real problem in the upcoming weeks, which does create potentially nice buy opportunities. So the Confessor slightly under pressure. Not too much yet, but it is hundreds of them coming to the market again. Next up we have the Hecate, went to 40 million ISK, but back under pressure at the tail end here, and I think it was last week that there was not too many of them, but look at the response: 115, 120, 543 at 38 million ISK, 37 for the buyers. This will get absorbed, I think, and we'll see this start to get under pressure as well on more supply. The Jackdaw seesawing its way back towards 40 million ISK, and look at that supply, 39 million, we've got 300, 477, another 42 here, another 23 here. The competition is now starting below 39 million ISK. This is again going to put that pressure on the buy orders. I think the Jackdaw will be under pressure because we've got hundreds of them coming to the market yet again. And then we finally have the Zwepel that's actually taking off towards more than 40 million is quite surprising. 40 million is for the sellers, 36.7 for the buyers. You have a slight sell opportunity basically in the Zwepel, still 100 here, 100 there, and this will of course get filled in because people that create tactical destroyers can take a breather on the others and look at the Zwepel right now for a bit of a better price, a bit of an above average price for the ship itself. Next up, let's take a look at the cruiser. Here is the Legion, back under pressure as well, heading for 150, 155 for the sellers, and it's basically a relisting of 400 Legions that is making this happen. 152 for the sellers. I would say if you want to use one of these cruisers, this is a great time to buy a Legion, because we are definitely, you know, at around 150 for their availability. 300, that's a lot, but it's really only those 400 Legions that spring out as being big supply. The Loki also under pressure a little bit, below 250 now. 227 for the sellers, 208 for the buyers, and look at that, 468, 343, another 60, another 52, and the competition starts from that price range, so under pressure again as well from availability. Still, it's very expensive ship at the moment, the Loki. Next up, we've got the Proteus. Let's take a look at that chart if it wants to load. Going back below 150, so should see some pressure, some extra supply. 60, 60, 180, another 40. a real listing at 150 million ISK. People are just not willing to make massive amounts of Pro-TI to bring that price even lower, but that availability is still quite high. And then we've got the Tengu finally, that is also dipping below 150 on a real listing at 146, 600, 180, 235, 120. That's quite a lot of Tengus to go through. So again, if you're looking to fly a Tengu, to fly a Legion, I think this is a great time to do so. Not sure why you would want to fly a Proteus, just not that great at the moment, but you could also get that at a decent price. And we can see that from time to time that oversupply specter is still looming. It's not super pronounced, but it is definitely here, for instance, pushing the Hecate back down. Be very careful with your investments there. I would definitely not put too much ISK in these purchases. You could from time to time, you know, buy a couple of ships. Absolutely, I don't blame you for that because we are seeing quite high availability and low prices. But I personally still feel that at some point we might get oversupply across the board, and then we'll actually see where the bottoms will form. The Zwepel right now is basically what's keeping this in check, because here we do have a bit of a jump up to 40 million ISK on a slightly lower availability. But that can get filled very quickly, and then who knows what happens in the upcoming weeks. To me, very interesting to try and snag that bottom in these Tech 3 ships, especially in the destroyers at the moment. And then for the extra product this week at 40.45, we're gonna take another look at the faction frigates. So there we go, just to get a feel of faction ships, what might be happening there. I think that the frigates can be interesting. We will actually start with the Navy factions here. So here's the Caldari Navy Hookbill landing at 150 and being there for the last couple of months. Back at it's not a bottom price, it's not a high point either, so this feels like a faction warfare situation that's a bit more balanced. 50 million for the sellers, 13 million for the buyers. Then we've got the opposite faction, I think, Federation Navy Comet, also landing at 150, which is not the bottom, but it's definitely not a high point either. Almost 15 million for the sellers, 13.3 for the buyers. This feels like Galente and Caldari is back on a more stable situation where neither of them are completely overwhelming the other. So here, you know, maybe a buy opportunity and then wait for someone to completely lose out, to have no more LP coming in and then hope for that top. I think you could try to do that because we are definitely here on the buyer side of things at an okay average price, so you could take that gamble, but if you have patience, of course, you can try to find the real imbalance. At the moment, Amar seems to be going up, breaking through that 15 million mark, coming from a low point of around 10 million, I think would have been possible. Now up to 17 million and 15 million for the buyers, definitely up in the last 2 months here. Then we've got the Republic Fleet Firetail that's actually reaching 10 million ISK. You can see the bottom here. So we've got 10.5 for the sellers and less than 10 million for the buyers. Look at the historical chart here. We can see that Amar is putting some pressure on that, going up in price. No, which means that they're losing. Up in price means that they don't have a lot of LP available. Down in price means that there's lots of LP available, so it looks like the Minmatar are winning out at the moment, which means that the Republic Fleet Firetail is very cheap. If you, this would be my investment right now in these faction frigates. It would be the Republic Fleet Firetail for 10 million ISK, the very bottom of the chart, and then, you know, wait for the Amar to stage their comeback. Also looks really cool in my opinion. God damn, Firetail. I think I'll just buy a couple, maybe even just have one to fly around in myself, just because it looks so cool. Is the Crucifier confirming the pattern over the last couple of months? Up, not by too much, nothing too visible, but 18.5 million for the sellers, 14.5 million, and we actually, if we look at it like that, you can clearly see that we come from that 10 million bottom and up towards 20 million at the moment. The Griffin for the Caldari is, you know, 20 million, right on the average. So, and then the Maulus here is, yeah, also bottom average. You know, it's difficult to say for the Maulus, but it really does feel like Caldari Galente is back on a more average price, so a more stable situation, or an a balanced situation between the two, but it's pretty obvious that the Minmatar here, with the Vigil Fleet issues, average prices all over the place with bottoms at 10 million ISK, have high availability, lots of loyalty points. Still selling for 15.5 million, but buyers at close to 10 million ISK. This would be the investment right now, I think, some Minmatar ships, it would seem. Next up, we have the pirate factions. Let's take a look at what those are doing. The Astero is coming from a high of 65 million ISK, but is very quickly moving back down. Sellers at 59.8, buyers at 52.3. That is definitely quite a good price if you're looking for that buy order. So Astero, if you want to have a couple, I'd say look at the buy orders. The Crewer is above average, staying above 60 million ISK, it seems. Not bad. 65 for the sellers, 59 for the buyers. Definitely a great time to find and sell some Crewers. Then we've got the Daredevil, same pattern, going up well above average now, heading for 70 million. 80 million, in fact, for the sellers on lack of availability. 63.5 for the buyers. That's a very wide margin between the two, but Daredevils, I think you find those in Serpentis sites from time to time, the BPCs. Definitely a great time to run some of those because you're getting a really nice price for that. Then we've got the Dramiel, that's actually coming from that high point in mid-June and is back towards a more average price. 45 million for the sellers, 40 million for the buyers. Nothing too special. The Garmer is up a little bit, but coming from a bottom price of less than 50 million ISK, is basically at a normal price, I think. 56.7 for the sellers, 52 million for the buyers. The Succubus, which is what can drop for me, is actually also at a high point. That is interesting. 65 million, not bad. 65 million for the sellers, 56 for the buyers. Definitely would be a nice drop to see a Succubus BPC drop from my exploration runs. And then we've got the Worm, that's actually on its way back down, still at 60 million, slightly above average, but not by too much anymore. Very, very interesting. So definitely here a Succubus, which is Sancha exploration, well above average price. And then we had the Daredevil, that's doing quite nice as well, around 70 million ISK. Not bad, not bad. And on the Navy factions, we can see the ebb and flow of the faction warfare, with at the moment Minmatar the big winners, and thus, in my opinion, your investment opportunity for this week. Something like the Republic Fleet Firetail looks pretty damn good for less than 10 million ISK. That's gonna be it for this week, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.